you guys doing today? Welcome to Your Real, Your Ideal podcast. I'm Amy Tokus, your co-host with
Sandy Lane, your other co-host. Very excited to be here this morning, Amy.
I am so excited about this topic. So you have been mentioning this for a while. It's the life script model, and I have never heard of it. But I can kind of imagine what it is. And reading your notes, I know a little bit more now. But I'm
Right.
interested to hear your perspective, how you heard about this, and share some about it because this is just super interesting, especially having young adult
Right.
children,
Right.
who are starting their life and stuff like that. So
If they knew what we know now, if we knew it back then, how do we parent them from what we figured out in our 40s
right,
and 50s? So, Amy, the term itself, um, I never knew how to coin it, but I felt it when I was in my 40s and I was going through my divorce, that I was suddenly off some type of a script. I was off what I was supposed to be doing and trying to figure out how people reacted to me, how to change. And where the I had never known the phrase the life script model until I heard it on a podcast. And so first I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I had, you know, I felt like I had everything down pat, following steps, and then life changed for me when I got divorced in my early 40s with young to teenage children, and yeah, and things changed quite drastically. So I'm going to start by let's get into what it means before I go forward. So I'm going to share the screen, and let me go over here. It's the first time in our Zoom podcast that we did share the screen.
this is testing our technology skills.
And I just back to being real and it being our podcast. I'm going to apologize for the trucks behind, but that's real. And if they get a little bit loud. And secondarily, I did have the little ball, the Apple ball of shame, but it is not doing that anymore. So we are good. So I am going to, I'm going to so this gal, her name is Kate Bowler. And just a little bit of a background, because I would highly recommend, she has a book called Everything Happens and For a Reason is Crossed Out. And Bill Gates recommended her book as one of his picks for the year. That's how I started. I read her book, short read, great read. She was diagnosed with stage 4, I believe, colon cancer in her early 30s. So her life changed dramatically. She is a very good communicator, and she has a podcast series that is excellent. And so when you look at this screen, you'll see Kate Bowler. Here's her email. And I've listened to all of her podcasts, but this one struck me when she had interviewed Nora McInerney. And Nora had lost her husband when they were both very young. So here's where she introduced the life script model.
I think there is this overwhelming desire for people to follow the life script model. And when people break it, it becomes very noticeable.
Yeah.
And
like when people die when they're 35, you're like, what? Like,
yeah.
No. When kids die,
Yes.
you're like, whoa.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Your pregnancy in 2017 didn't fit into a neat story. Can you tell me what happened?
Ugh.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because what she's talking about, a lot of what she talked about with the life script model is loss, health issues, loss, uncontrollables. And what they're getting into is Nora, after her husband died, she got pregnant right away. And it wasn't by her husband who had just died. And it was somebody that she was in a relationship with, but everybody freaked out because number one, part of the life script model is when your husband dies, the next step is you're to grieve. You're certainly not to end up pregnant and having a fling with somebody. So she went outside of the norms of what society felt her role should be and how her life script should play out. So the life script model, and I looked it up to see the exact definition. What it means is it's the stories about our lives that we project on ourselves. And most of the time, and this is why we're talking about it with parenting, is many times it's framed by our parents and by how we parent, because what you're trying to do is project the stories onto your children on what their life is supposed to look like and the life script they're supposed to be trying to follow. Okay. And so what they talk about in the podcast that resonated with me and had me really thinking about my life script model is how, for Nora, you know, it was so hard for her because people didn't know what to say. They didn't agree with what she was doing. Everything she was doing was against the life script model. And she had it from both sides because it was the pregnancy and she had already had another child, you know, through the husband that she was supposed to be grieving. And it happens a lot that people say, you know, they tell you what the grieving process is supposed to be, what your next step is supposed to be outside of high school, what makes you a happy, you know, the steps you go to. And we talked about this in our first episode, Amy, about one of the reasons why we wanted to start this podcast is, you know, how we followed the rules in our 20s and 30s and how we had a different view of those later. So one more thing I'll add, then why it resonated with me, and then we'll start talking back and forth about this, is why it resonated with me is I was really good at the life script model, meaning when I was in my 20s and 30s, I knew, okay, I'm going to get the job. I'm going to have the 401k. I knew exactly when I was going to have my kids. My kids are all April birthdays. And I was so proud of that because I was a CPA and, you know, I planned my kids' births around tax season. I knew that I wanted to be a partner when I was 30. I sent them to the exact Catholic school I wanted them to go to. I ended up trustee of I had it down pat. And then all of a sudden my life script model blew up. You know, Amy, before my divorce, I already had planned out and saved a box to have my 25th wedding anniversary party at the same place where we got married. And that was 5 years from there. And I remembered later thinking, boy, I thought I had this all figured out. But here's the reality, and here's the conversation point on it. Because it's not about I did everything wrong, okay, by trying to do that. But following and parenting under the life script model, there's three things that happen if you don't think outside the box. And the first one is that maybe that model isn't the best one for you. By just simply following the life script model and following all those logical steps that society, our parents, doing what our parents did, what everybody else is doing, it's highly likely that isn't the best script for you. And it doesn't, people following it without thinking does not allow them to think outside the box on what's best. It's not just what the script that's put in front of you. The second one, which goes back to the podcast, is many times there are uncontrollable factors that are going to change it. And because we're so wired into the life script model that we don't know how to react, or the reaction isn't, it's a grieving process even when you fall out of that model, not so much for your loss, but because you feel like you're a failure because you're not following it. And life happens, no matter what. It's the title of our book, Life Happens. And rarely is it the life script model. And the other thing, and there is my dog, and tell you the third thing is, yeah, he's cute. He's going to be part of the podcast here. The other part of the life script model is the fact that, you know, you're limiting yourself and you're limiting others by projecting it on them. You know, it kind of goes back to number one, which is for yourself. And number three, to me, goes back into what we're talking about with parenting is I learned when I was 40, I wish I was more open-minded and embracing other things at a younger point in life. And I parent differently because I do parent outside the life script model. And Amy, it's hard. It's hard on my kids. It's hard on me because it's so easy for others to judge success, to judge what you should be doing as a parent, how you react. You know, for me, the big thing is what my kids do when they graduate, what schools they go to, what they participated in high school. If you deviate from that model, people don't get it, you know, and it's easy to say I'm going to think outside the life script model, but it's not easy because society portrays it differently.
Wow. All right.
That's a lot. Sorry. That's a lot.
Good. It's good. I have like so many little notes here. One of the, yeah, I don't even know where to start. When I was thinking of life scripts, I was thinking a lot about my kids and the script that I've had for them. And I was also reflecting on the script that I had for myself as a young female in STEM. When I started going down the engineering path, we kind of talked about this, like I was going to have a job. We lived in Kansas City at the time. And I remember telling my mom, I'm going to get a high paying job. I'm going to live on the plaza. I'm going to, I'm going to have this car. And I had like all these, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Well, then, I met my husband during college. And so that twisted just a little, okay, so I'm going to be married. And so okay, I'm changing it a little bit, but it was all very normal and all very like, keep going. And so my mom was, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my mom because she influenced me a lot in my decision to go into engineering, and not because she's technical, but more because she felt very strong about her daughters being able to support themselves. So she was definitely, a 60s hippie from California, and she believed in women's equality and women's strength. And, we don't want to be victims in a life. We want to be empowered and be able to support ourselves. Okay. So that's what I grew up getting that in my head. So not only when I was pursuing this, I was following my life script, but it was also her life script for me of perfect. This is exactly what I want my daughter to be doing. Okay. So as I was reflecting on that, there was a turning point, and it's when I decided to quit my job.
And how long had you been at your job, and how old were you?
I was 26.
Okay.
And so I'd only been working for about 4 years.
Which in today's world would be a lot, but back then you took a job to go for your retirement and to be fully vested,
right.
It was more than 4 years.
Right. And I had a great job. Like I had a great job. And when I was expecting the baby, they were even willing to manipulate my job some for some flexibility, which was unknown at that time. But we kind of just decided, I'm just going to take a break and spend some time and not work for a while. Okay. That did not go over well. Just to say, I'm just going to say that was not part of the script.
Right.
And it was great for me to step out of that box. And I'm just going to say this, very normal. Like, it's not like I stepped way out of the box and did something really crazy.
Right. Right.
This was a normal thing. Some people chose to, and some people chose not to stay home with their kids. That's fine. But my mother, she had real issues with it. She was not, and you could just feel the lack of support for that, because that was not her script for me. So I carry that with me with my children too, because sometimes I did the same thing you did. I've had this, this is what we do. Yep. Yeah.
Here's your steps. And with parenting, it's that whole, and then add to it, Amy, and this is part of the conversation between, because that would have been what, would that have been the 90s for you?
Yeah, it was 96.
You know, so note to audience, no social media, no,
Right.
really how people would find out is probably through the Christmas card that went out. If that
Right.
usually was the summary of everything that goes in, the highlights of social media would go out in a Christmas card. If there was a job change, a baby, prom picture, that's usually how we communicated. So there wasn't a lot of pressure about what you're doing. And with now back to parenting kids, everything is announced down to whether they made the select team, what colleges they
Right.
got into, every milestone, every homecoming date, every engagement, every milestone on that life script model, every new job, it is proclaimed on social media. And no matter, our children vary in how much that matters to them or not. And with my kids, it varies, you know, and a little bit of talking can, like one pays no attention to it, one, he gets bothered a little bit more by it. But trying to even coach, it's so much easier for them to do what everybody else is doing, even if it's not all the time, and follow that, because it's, you don't need to make a choice. That's another thing about following the life script model, is it's the path of least resistance. And the path of least
Right.
resistance is what
The easy.
everybody almost wants to take, because not only is it on social media, it's answering questions, you know. Amy, I'll give you an example.
Oh, explaining. Yeah, trying
Explaining.
to justify and explain. And if you're following the life script, you don't have to give any explanation.
But if you're not following the life script that they think you should have, my best analogy of my life over the last 10 years, not just my life, my kids' life, an extension, even my work life. So I've got it all going on because I don't follow any life script. I went from, I mean, people admired me because I followed the life script. I've learned that too, is there were a lot of admiration because I was so good at following that life script and I did it so well. And so now there isn't a facet of my life, I really don't think so, that follows the life script, whether it be my kids, my marriage, my work. And Amy, having conversation is like, I've learned I avoid conversations about myself because I need a whiteboard to explain it. And I almost know right away, because I can see, you know, like the questions, who do you work for? It's actually better now that people work remotely and they get that. But if I can't name, I work for ConAgra, I work for Berkshire, well, I work for myself, well, what do you do? And you work remotely, well, you know, they just don't get that. If the question about my kids, or let's use Grant because he's 20, what college does he go to and what fraternity is he in? And I try to explain that he hasn't decided what he wants to go to school for. He has taken some classes in different, and they just look at me and they're like, it's almost like he's in prison, or there's some, like nobody would ever make that decision on their own to, because especially in America, that's the life script model. And
Right.
it's so trying to teach our kids, we're adults and we can change the subject, but think about how hard it is for them to answer those questions from strangers, from family, from grandparents, from
It's the old, when are you getting married?
Right.
For the young single women. Yeah, exactly.
Did you have a baby yet?
I know. Yeah, exactly. Which I don't think that happens anymore. I don't know, but it feels like, I hope not. I hope it doesn't. So I'm wondering like how you give your children, so Sandy, let's say you stayed on the life script.
Right.
And how, which, you know, at some points I look at my life and I'm like, I'm pretty much on the life script. There's nothing blaring saying, woo, woo, look at Amy. She's doing something different. At least in my eyes, I don't think there is. But how do you give others permission to exit the life script when you're not role modeling that? That's kind of a little bit of my, my dilemma, because sometimes I feel like I'm not role modeling doing stuff different and being different. But I do want my kids to have the confidence to be different and to do different. And I don't know if I'm doing enough. What do you think? Like, you don't know my kids very well, but anyway. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with the life script model in general if it's working for you, right? It's
Right.
really the level of happiness, and you've found ways, you've modified from it and tried to look for those things. But I love this definition because
Okay, so just
often.
I like that you just said that. There's nothing wrong with the life script if it's working for you.
Right.
But if it's not working for you, it's okay to step off of it. That's a really key point, is just accepting whatever works best for you.
Which goes because everybody's life circumstances are different. So
Right.
I might have stayed on it and been just as happy, but life gave me some things that changed everything.
Right.
And I needed to look at things differently. And the other thing is, the reason it's the life script is because it works for most people, right? That's how those scripts develop, is because they're the most common. Okay, so it doesn't mean you have to be, it kind of goes back to our last podcast about I'll have what she's having. That's why that topic came up to me, is because people say she's so happy, so I have to do all these things outside the realm to be happy. I need a new husband, I need, and that's not the formula. So to answer your question, I love how the definition about life scripts are stories about the lives we project on ourselves. So don't project stories on people, whether it's somebody you're asking about their life. Don't project their story, listen to their story. And the same with our kids. Don't project the story of them. Let them have their own story and how they want that story to be. And if you think of it that way, so my conversations with the kids is I'm always trying to, if it's something deep, push away all that other, whether it be expectation, whether it be it's what I'm supposed to be. Tell me the story of you. Where are you at now? What do you want to do? And if we push out all that stuff, and I'm not projecting on them, which is not that easy actually with your kids to project on them. It's hard, right? Because I always think I have a plan for them, even if it's, we were talking about a project I was working on with one of my kids, and I projected exactly how enthusiastic and what he was supposed to be doing. And I finally had to say, it's not what he needs right now. I got to lay off, but it's letting them develop their own stories. That's my thought, which isn't easy, but that's the core.
Yeah. So it's funny, my sister and I were having a conversation kind of about this. It's the perspective of the late 20-year-olds.
Right.
And actually it was for her boys, and they're in they're 30. Well, yeah, they're 30 and 32 now. So anyway, early 30s now. And when they were in their late 20s, a few years back, they weren't dating people, but they were socializing. And one of the determining factors on whether they would actually engage with other people was when they were meeting people, the first question they asked was, "What do you do?" They did not like that question. They thought that was putting people in a box, because it wasn't saying, what do you believe? Or tell me about yourself. Right. It was a,
what's important.
What do you do?
Right. Yeah. What do you do?
And so it projected what was important to that person was what they did. And so they tended to weed people out who asked that question first, which I thought was such an interesting perspective, because our generation, at least me, it was always like, this is what I do. This is who I am. Right. But you're so much more than that. So anyway, I was kind of impressed at their maturity to be able to do that in their
I
20s.
hear that a lot too, and it's back to that maturity and knowing somebody. What the innate thing that they don't like about it is, number one, is somebody is defining the most important part of their story, which is what they do. And you know what's,
Right.
I read an article last weekend, and it was actually fascinating. I should find it. When I say it was an article, they gave the top 25 things that people who, for outside the United States, are mind blowing about Americans. And one of them is that this is an American thing, that Americans say, "What do you do?" Like, to them, that's like saying, "What color is your underwear?" You know, you don't, that isn't a normal, they just, it's almost mind blowing to them that that is a typical first question. What do you do? Well, that's none of your business. What do I do? You know,
Right.
and then the other one that really caught me was they can't believe that 17-year-olds are making life-changing decisions on their career path and going into tens of thousands of dollars of debt sometimes, and making that decision for college and university at that age. And the comment was, you know, they all have, they don't, most of their colleges are not that expensive, and they're government ran, which isn't perfect, but it's mind blowing to them that a 17-year-old can commit, 17, 18-year-old can commit to that kind of debt. And we expect them to know exactly what they want to do, or a really
Right.
good idea to make those kind of choices at that age. And
Right.
isn't it always interesting to hear somebody else's perspectives? To me, those really fell in what we're talking about at Life Script, because those are very normal things. Like, would we even really think twice about somebody asking us over and over again, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And, or that, where are you going to college? What are you going to do for the rest of your life? You know, to an 18-year-old. And that's just commonplace for us. And then hearing somebody who has a different life script model, because, you know, culturally, that isn't part of their life script model in other countries, and how they look at that differently for us, and how you do get into these different things that seem so normal and okay. And if you really took a step back, it's like, is that for everyone, you know, or is that the right question?
Yeah. Talking about kids and going to college through this pandemic, I've heard a lot of talk of kids taking a gap year next year.
Right.
To take a pause, which they're not going to be able to travel. So this is not a luxury gap year of I'm going to travel the world, and, you know, it's more of a economic decision, a functional of I'm just going to stay home and work as much as I can and save money and then go next year, which will be interesting. Again, I think we talked about this before. If this carries over to a different script, a more acceptable of take a pause and figure out if it works for you, if it's a good financial decision, or, you know, if you're ready to make that decision right now.
You make a great point. And here's the reality. When you're 20, let's just use 20 years old, you don't know what you don't know. You don't have the experience. So we might think we have things so much more figured out now, but we have the benefit of life experiences. We have the benefit of maturity and understanding. And so back to, whether it be coaching or parenting kids of that age, they don't know what they don't know. So we are put in the situation of trying to, you know, it's easy to say, don't follow the life script model, do whatever feels good, and what's your story? They don't know what their story is. And so it does make it more difficult, because the easiest thing is to project our own experience onto them and have them do what we did, because that's what we know best, right? What do you want to do in parenting? You want to do what's best for your kids. And so helping them develop their story and for them to figure it out, those gap years, or the more experience, I always say, when people say, you know, oh gosh, your oldest is 26, you know, the question, does he have a girlfriend? And I'm like, that's mind blowing to me. It's like, why would it matter? Because they're thinking he should be getting married, and, you know, they're projecting the story onto him. And I don't feel comfortable. I'm like, why are you asking me if my son has a girlfriend? You know, that I don't know you that well, right?
Right.
but that's their, but he's developing his own story, and that's just, you know, part of like you meeting your husband when you're in college. That wasn't part of that life script, and it happened, right? But back to developing their stories, I love the gap year because the idea of them saying, I don't know, but I want to find out and I want to explore. You know, there's a lot of things that go around that. You know, are they losing a scholarship? Does it make financial sense? You know, I've got, you know, a stepson who's a really smart kid and very much knows what he wants to do. And a gap year for him, he might lose out on some really high dollar scholarships that make a lot more sense to him, you know, right away than to wait.
Right.
So every situation is different. Amy, I love, it was actually, and this would have been back in the 70s, Mike Rowe. I listened to his podcast. He's great. Do you know who he is? He was like the Dirty Jobs.
Yeah.
I call him a modern day, oh gosh, now I can't think of Paul Harvey. Modern day Paul Harvey.
Oh yeah.
He has a
Good.
great
Yeah.
podcast. It's only like 15 to 20 minutes and it's Paul Harvey-ish stories. Do you want to know what Mike Rowe did? And I read, this was in one of his books or blog posts. When he graduated from high school, he had a lot of things he really liked. Like he liked the play, he liked to act. He was really smart kid. His parents were, you know, both were very smart academic, and they thought, oh, this is the kid that needs to go on to college. And he chose to go to a community college. And you know what he did? He went to a community college because he knew he'd have to pay for a lot of college himself. And he had the maturity to say, I'm not ready to write that kind of a check or to take that kind of a chance because I don't know what I want to do. And he looked through their curriculum and he took everything from acting to cooking to business. And he took like a class in every area and tested different things out. And he did this for like 2 years and decided he liked journalism and broadcasting. You know, he kept paring it down to what he liked at a very low cost. And by that time he was mature enough and he knew what he wanted to do. And he went off to the university and got his degree. But I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and it all worked out, right? But I thought, well, I kind of like that about being able to test different things out and see what was of interest. And if it really was a great thing. One thing that happened a lot with my degree in accounting is we would hire people at my firm that spent 4 to 5 years in accounting for school, and they decided you kind of either really, really like accounting or you really, really don't. And the ones, we'd have people that really, really didn't like accounting once they got out and did it. And here they had 4 to 5 years of accounting, and they'd go back to be a biology major. One guy went back to OD school. One went in for journalism, but they went back and redid the whole thing all over again. And
oh my gosh, my parents would have killed me. Sorry.
My parents,
we're like,
back to the life script, you know, let's be back to realities. Our parents would have killed us and it wasn't practical. So maybe you would have learned other traits. You know, the idea in not following the life script model or exploring outside the life script model. How about that? Isn't, I'm 22 and I hate accounting and I'm going to do something else. You have to take the practicalities in mind too.
Right. So you're making me think of my son, Trevor. He's a senior this year. And so he's thinking about college. Okay. And he wants to be a comedian. He wants to do stand-up comedy and write comedy. Okay.
That's outside the life script model. I love it. He's
thinking outside the life script, and I tell him, you know, I'm creating content for you every day. So you just keep, he has a little notepad where he's keeping notes. But this was a bit of a challenge for Tom and I to listen to him say this, and in our minds knowing, all right, what's the success rate of this? You know, where's he going to fit in this? How does he measure up to all the other talented people out there who are doing comedy? Like, and so I just kind of paused when I heard this, because I was like, oh boy. And I really did think, oh my gosh, I've created a lot of content for this kid. But Tom's response, he's a little bit more, he's definitely more life script. Like, this is the script. And so he was like, what's your backup plan? And I sat with that for a minute and kind of, then we discussed it a little, and we came to the conclusion that he does not need a backup plan, because if he is really passionate about this, he needs to go in 100%.
Right.
And
Love it.
yeah, but scary. I'm just going to say completely scary, because, you know, we're helping him pay for college. We're sending him to a college. He's going to do comedy writing. And I'm excited for him because he is super excited and he is 100% in. And I will say, of all of my kids, he's probably the one who's most excited about their degree.
And how did you nurture that or feed that? You know, again, each of our kids are different, but as a parent, what did you feel like you did something different? You nurtured it, you know, is it because he's the youngest? What was different with him, or how good for you? How was that seed planted and nurtured?
So that's a good question. I don't know, because he is the youngest. And so I do think he gets a little bit of all right, go for it. Because I'm a little bit less defining of what he does and what's expected of him. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
With my oldest, she was very studious, and she was taking all the AP classes, and she was like, you know, and he's more laid back and kind of class clown. And I've just been like, you know, hindsight, I see what's important and what's not important. And so if I'm not going to force him to do all those hard classes, if he's not into it, it's a waste of his energy. It's a waste of my energy trying to. So I do really think it's mostly about him being the last, and it's about my maturity and my acceptance.
Is it your expectations too?
Expectations of.
I find the same thing.
Yeah.
And do you think back to the life script model, there's a real reality in it, is rarely do people actually follow like never. That's almost impossible. This whole true life script model, they might show you that they do it on social media, but rarely does it happen, because we're human and things happen and health happens and things just happen, right? And because we're a series of decisions. I learned from oldest to youngest that I started beginning to figure out that the life script model was, I don't know, I don't want to say it's a fair, my expectations were, I was less like this and saw how life changes. And I was probably more open-minded by the youngest one, of knowing that life is what you put into it. Your point on, if he's passionate about it, he's going to be successful. I'd rather have him be focused on this and put his love and passion into it, rather than, you know, you're going to go off the model for a little bit, but how are you going to get back on track? You know, what's your.
Yeah. And I will tell you, I think I've come around. I think what you said exactly is, you start seeing people stepping off the life script, and it becomes more normal as you mature, and you see other people's kids stepping out of the life script. And so it's kind of like, all right, because I will tell you, I think I'm more accepting of it. As I know I'm more accepting of it, and encouraging of it, especially with my oldest kid now, because, you know, she's now 25 or 24. How old is she? Like, how old is she? She just turned 24. So I'm aging her. The kids across the street are 25 yesterday. That's why I'm like, wait a minute, that's not.
I have to think about it all the time now too. We don't use halves anymore, Amy. You know, back in the day, 8.5.
Yeah. So, but she's 24 now, and, you know, just broke up with her boyfriend of 5 years. And I kind of, you know, in our time, it would have been, okay, where are we progressing? Where's this going? And she was completely fine not going there and calling it done. And I told her she was going through a hard time, and I'm like, how you doing? And she kind of was emotional. I said, you know what, I see. Or I think I asked her, I'm like, so what have you learned from all of this? And
What a great question.
uh, because she was doing some reflecting and she was emotional, and I was just like, you know what, I've learned that you're brave. You are brave enough to step off of the expectations, the
Yes.
responsibilities that were tied to this relationship because they had a place. And um, I'm like, that's bravery. And so for me, um, I think that was kind of me acknowledging that bravery, and celebrating that was a big step for me, instead of saying, why aren't you, which I would never do. I would never do that. But um,
It's there's just funny story. I actually remind my husband of this. Two things I'll give my husband Garrett credit for.
just
Is,
two.
two today, two right now, two right now. One
Okay.
is when you talked about, he is really big about, and he's never called it the life script model, but when life doesn't go your way, and sometimes that means when life isn't going across the plan, isn't following that step by step, whether it's, I didn't get into graduate school, I broke up with the significant other. I mean, all of my kids, his kids have had this, and he always says, every piece of our life is a piece of the story and a piece of your journey. You can't change it. That was part of your journey. What did you learn from it? And how are you going to take that and move? What did you learn from it that you can move forward and use it? Whether it be, I'm going to try again, I'm going to get in. Whether it be, you know what, I don't have the passion, or whether it be a relationship. And we really, both of us are big about not taking, especially if it's a bad relationship, meaning I lost my job, I didn't get along with my roommate, I broke up with my boyfriend, is what did you learn from the journey? And it's not about who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. This is not villains and victims.
Right.
It's people, and that's okay. It's okay to be in a relationship with someone to whatever capacity, and relationships don't work out. What did you learn from the journey, the good and the bad? And how's that going to help you with either your next relationship, your next story piece, that decision making that you have to make? That he always goes back, just like you did, to what did you learn? Here's what I've seen, and keeping it positive and saying, how does my past journey impact my future? Because at the end of the day, it's your story, mine's my story, and we're just trying to help you critically think. And I say that a lot. I'll give myself credit for this one, is if the most successful thing I need to do for my kids as a parent is help them critically think on their own. I want them to be good citizens, but if I can help them critically think and look at those things and move forward, and to me that goes into life script model, is whether it's to stay on it, deviate from it, there reaches a point with their maturity that we're always going to be there for them. My mother continually reminds me that she's still parenting me, which she is, right? But how do we, if I complain to her a little bit, she's like, well, you know what? You weren't a piece of cake in your 40s. So it doesn't stop. So she always tells me that. But helping them, I love what you said about how did that help with the journey. And then the second thing with Garrett was, he's a big planner. And one 4th of July, we were out on a hike, and he was planning for the next year. And it had to do with work, and it had to do with kids. And here's what this year is going to look like. And I asked him, I said, a year ago we had this conversation. How much of that plan came to fruition, or how many different? And he's like, really not much of it did. Kids went to different schools. I mean, what we thought was going to happen in the year to come did not come to fruition, but we had a good year, but it wasn't. And so planning is really good, especially about your life, because you can't just, part of this whole talking about the life script model doesn't mean you wake up and say, what do I feel like doing? You have to have a plan, but you have to also accept it's okay if the plan deviates. It's how you react to it and making the next step. And you can't beat yourself up if you're not following that. And planning on following the life script model goes back to path of least resistance. It's the easiest way to do it, but it's okay to chill a little bit and modify as we go, because that's typically what happens anyway.
And sometimes the life script isn't defined well. Sometimes stepping out of the life script isn't because of something you've done. It's something external that's made you step out of the life script.
Like the podcasts, you know, it was cancer for one, and it was losing a husband. And yeah, you know, we thought we were going to be in Boise and we were going to move, and now we live with my father-in-law, right? And
yeah,
all good. But it's, would I have predicted that 2 years ago when my son, you know, we're empty nesters, I mean, we're all adults, but it's not what we thought, you know, it's different, and you modify. So
yeah.
Should we look at some of the questions, Amy? Do we have time, or are we out of time?
Well, we probably have like 5 minutes. What are we?
Pick one of the questions. We have a few questions here. I thought they were pretty good.
Okay, let's go
Did
for
you
it.
see them?
I did.
How about the third one? I think this one's interesting. It said, did our parents follow the life script model when parenting us, or do we think it's gotten worse generationally or with this generation? You know, how would we compare and contrast? And you kind of touched on that when you talked about your mother and her experience. Do you think it's harder to parent outside the life script model now versus before?
So I'll share this. I think it's harder now. Well, so I don't know. That's a really good question. I was going to say, I think it was harder 10 years ago than it is now, but I think that's a me being a little bit more evolved. So I don't know. I thought it was harder 10 years ago. But here's one thing I'm going to say about my mom. We had 2 girls and a boy. The script was written for my sister and I.
I had to script than my brothers too.
And
I did.
my brother had a little bit different script. It wasn't, she wasn't, I don't want to say she wasn't concerned about him, but she wasn't as assertive as to what the script should be for him, because he could probably take care of himself, was my, I think that's what she thought, versus the girls, she wanted to make sure that we could, and we knew we could take care of ourselves. So that's an interesting, I think it's easier now. And it could be because I'm 50 and I've seen more people go off script than I had in my 30s. And seeing people do it gracefully, and seeing people come out of it good on the other side, and seeing people be okay outside the script. So to me, it's like, all right, you can be outside the script and you're okay. You know what I mean? So
that's great. And I agree. I totally agree. The other thing I'll say is I'm going to give the millennials and Generation Z a lot of credit, because I think they're more comfortable going outside the script. You know, people will complain about millennials. I applaud them. They're not buying houses right away. My son doesn't, you know, I'm taking it more personally that somebody asked me as a girlfriend. He just thinks like, who would ask that? You know, like he's living his life. He's got his dogs. He's got the mountain. He's defining his happiness, and he's comfortable in that. And I don't know if my friends, or if, you know, go back 10 years, go back 20 years, generationally, we would have been as comfortable with that, because you go back to a class reunion, what did everybody look at? Who did you work for? How many kids? it really was a life script model. Excuse me, but I feel like this generation is brave. Both of those generations, they're different.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even in the work that I do with different people, you can tell this generation, um, the under 30s. I'm just going to say, so it's
Just
multiple,
30s. Yep.
but the under 30s, even up to mid 30s, they are really less attached to stuff. They don't want the stuff. They don't. They're much more mature when it comes to that. So
Yeah.
and being outside the box too. But I will also say, um, when they're outside the box, some of them don't share that as much.
They kind of go off social media or they go off grid a little bit, unless it's exotic pictures, then they go off grid. But people stay on grid more when they're doing the life script model.
And that's it. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. When they're following that, they can share things. Yesterday, my son was sharing with me a TikTok that did all these goofy videos, and she's like, instantly, she only has 400 videos, and she's got millions of followers, and it's been over like the last month or two. Like it's been really like quick, crazy, and she stepped off of TikTok yesterday for a while or something. And he's like, she's only been on a couple of months. And so he started showing me her videos, and they are totally out of the box, weird, nothing bad about them, just strange, quirky,
Right.
funny. And he was like, and I was thinking, all right, good. See, he celebrates someone and that's one of the things I like
That's
about
their own thing. I love it.
doing different things with it, and it's funny and it's celebrating all this creativity and fun stuff. So
That's awesome. We all have our own stories. We don't know
right.
when they're going to end. We don't know what circumstances are going to be thrown on it. And parenting, it's trying to do the best we can to develop their story to be the best them
Right.
without over parenting.
Right. All right. So we are like
We're over.
time. I'm like, oh, the clock's behind me today, so I wasn't staring at it. So I was like, we should probably wrap this thing up. I don't. What's the question today? I had one in my head when I went for my walk this morning. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and they're inspiring me. And I wrote down your book, Everything Happens. I think I'm gonna pick that up because
She's
that's
very articulate, young lady, very good, very good. It's so then my read, and tonight my mother is facilitating. We do a virtual book club. It's similar, but unfortunately, he passed away. Have you ever read When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi? See all my little tick marks. Very, very good book too. And he was a doctor, a surgeon, and the first half of the book was more him looking at life and thinking about life and following the life script model. And the second half of the book is him dealing with being dealt a fatal illness and dealing with that. And he's he actually went to Cambridge, and he's a very good author, and decided to get into medicine, especially neurology, because he was fascinated with the brain, the feeling, people. He had this real deep side, and you get that through the book. But back to, it goes with Kate Bowler, when the life script model, with nothing that you have done, when it changes, how you react to that and how you make your life meaningful. But I would highly recommend it.
That's the key. How do you make your life meaningful? I love that. I'm just gonna end with another quick life script deviation that I have. I think I talk about my hair every week. One of mine was going gray though. when I was in my 40s, I've been gray since probably mid 30s and I've been coloring my hair, but in my mid 40s, I decided to stop coloring. And I'm telling you what, that was a huge leap for me. And I got lots of questions. I had to explain myself a lot. And
now it's Amy, people are dyeing their hair gray now. It's a very popular color. And so, but back to like, it's not the funniest things that are life script, you know, that you do or don't do, or yeah.
yeah, it's all, anyway, that was a life script jump for me. I just got my hair cut the other day. So
I think it looks wonderful. So.
Oh, thank you. It's so much easier. It saves me so much money. I'm all about practicality here.
I go with you. The other thing that comes with age. All right. Well, until next time.
Yeah. What are we talking about next time? Do we have a plan?
I don't know if we know what we're talking about next time, do we?
We've talked about it. We'll come up with something fun.
We'll come up with something great.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
We've got a long list. It's just trying to decide. All right. As always, Amy, wonderful talking to you. Until next time.
All right, bye.
Bye.